it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And sometimes you have to look at that internally as well.
They gon' see me on top. They gon' see me on top.
Hey y'all, we'd like to welcome you to the Stratos Expert Series. This is our second episode, and we are very, very grateful to have my friend Everett Brewer here with us.
How you doing, man?
Good.
Glad
Thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much for joining us.
Yeah.
After a long trip, you were at a trade show
Yep.
Vegas over the last week, and so what you wanted to do Monday morning was not sleep in, it was to, to come be with
Get
us.
back to work. Got plenty of work to do right now after the big show. So
I
yeah.
love it, man. Lots of contacts, lots of interest in what you're doing right now. So Everett comes to us from Storz Power, CEO, founder. Y'all have been around for, you said 12, 13 years now with Storz?
Yeah, so we turned 12 years old this month.
That's
so
incredible.
Excited about it.
That's incredible. You were way ahead of the curve on that, right? So we'll get into that. Also with WattHub, COO and also founder, which is now almost 16 years.
Yeah.
Right. And so, long time in the renewable energy space. So what drew you into that space originally? Again, way ahead of the curve. Like most people haven't even thought about renewable storage, especially until maybe 5 years ago, where it's really started to take off. So what was your initial interest in renewable energy, just to start right out of the gate?
Man, it was totally by accident. If you tell me this is what I'd be doing at this point in my life, I'd be like, what in the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
So long story short of it was I actually was consulting for a solar company locally here in Utah, 12 years ago actually. And at that time, a guy that knew me said, he called me the solar guy. And randomly enough, there was the patents to nano-printed lithium battery technology that was stuck in a shell with a hotel group, like totally non-related to the renewable energy industry. Flew me in, wanted to check it out. Obviously, I was in the renewable industry pretty fresh right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know what, opportunist to see where this could go. And we ended up opening up that manufacturing plant, started producing battery cells, and next thing you know, we're here as today. So totally by accident, would have had no clue that this would be the path I'm on now.
If somebody had said nano-printed lithium technology to me back then, I probably would have ran the other direction. So you lost me there.
Yeah, the most I related to is like protection for your car. Like a lot of people go and coat their vehicles with nanotechnology. I mean, that's as far as I had any knowledge at that point. So I was pretty mind blown myself. So I can understand where you're coming from.
So if somebody, if you're in this space where you're consulting, you're becoming the solar guy, and then you start to go down that road to where you almost immediately go into manufacturing. You had to have had an entrepreneur or at least a creative background. I think I read something about marketing as well.
Yeah.
So when did your knowledge or your desire to be, kind of into marketing, manufacturing, entrepreneurism, like where did you get that bug?
I can actually attest it to my family. So we own multiple different small businesses since I was a kid, and I think at that point, when you're young, you don't really have, big financial goals at that point. And in our case, it was more or less just keeping food on the table for my family. So I took a different approach in the fact that it was literally feast or famine in that scenario. And I think the grow up point for me, my little brother was diagnosed with cancer at age 10, and I was 15 and a half. So I'm the oldest of 8 kids, 2 of them that we adopted through a family member that unfortunately passed away. And in that moment, I had to grow up real quick because I was running the company for my parents as they were doing, cancer treatments. My brother for 2 years. So I guess I learned what the word purpose meant really early on.
Yeah.
And I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
It wasn't an option where you can kind of dabble into it and you got all the support around you, which I did have a lot of support, but in the end, you had to get yourself up out of bed and load trucks early and get kids off to school at 15 and a half years old. You have a different understanding of life.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Right?
Because you have, 8 kids, 2 that came from a family member, a little brother who's going through treatments. How did he do on the treatments?
Proud to say he's got 2 young boys that are happy, married, so grateful for the outcome there.
Awesome. So as a 15-year-old going through that, and you said you have to get out of bed, you have to do this. Well, a lot of people don't have to, right? But you had the mentality to do that. So what relationship did you have with your parents where they were supportive and motivating enough to, to where you wanted to help?
Yeah.
What was the atmosphere like?
The big thing that my dad ingrained into me is the only thing you have at the end of the day is your integrity. So you had the level of commitments that you had to make that were sometimes subconscious and sometimes obviously verbal in that regard. And I always watched my family fulfill on all their obligations, whether it was tough, easy, or difficult, didn't matter. And so seeing that, I wanted to have that same level of integrity and fulfillment and dependability as my dad did.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have any reason to fail, for the fact is that that's who I want to grow up to be.
So you said purpose, right? So generally we're borrowing a purpose until we have our own. As a kid, we kind of borrow that, whether that's from mentors or parents or friends, and it's not always a good purpose, right? And so it sounds like you were given a pretty good one to start with.
Yeah. It was life or death. I mean, that's a pretty dang good purpose.
Yeah. As far as you have kids, right? How many kids do you have?
So I got 3 kids.
3? It's not quite 8. Not yet.
Yeah.
So.
No, we're done here.
3's
but
awesome. Yeah.
3's a good.
Same
good
here.
Yep.
So with your 3 kids, are you taking some of those lessons plus your own? Like, how are you teaching them purpose?
That's a good point. I mean, when you're a kid that, unfortunately has kind of the lifestyle we have now, it's hard to find what their purpose is, what their thing that they value in those cases. And we actually read a book. It's actually a podcast. It's called How to Hug a Teenage Porcupine.
I've heard
And
that.
so it's actually a really good one.
Okay.
And I think there was 4 F's. I always remember 3. It's fun, friends, freedom, and there was a 4th one I always forget. But after that, it's kind of helped you understand what they really value in that regard, and then what you can do to keep them on that path and supporting them in that regard. Luckily, I've got a daughter she's 16, drives a ton of activity around sports, keeps us busy.
Yeah.
But that's definitely her fun and her freedom and her friends. And so luckily we have one category for that one.
Right. Yeah.
But ultimately just keep her accountable. That's one key thing. It's hard to teach accountability to a kid, but without having too much impact to their lifestyle. So.
Yeah. I've found that if you teach them, like if you're holding them accountable to values instead of, rules, where it's like, here's some values, here's some morals. It doesn't have to be a religious founded, background. It can just be simply good values and good morals. But then that's what you're holding them to.
Yep.
Where it's like, here's the values and morals that we try to exhibit in our family and what we try to follow. And then it's easier to hold them to that. And I also feel like if our kids or co-workers, employees, like if we have those same types of values, mission statement, sometimes if somebody drifts out of that, for one, it's easy to see, right? It's easy to say, hey, maybe this isn't the right culture. Yeah. But 2, a lot of times they find their way back because it's a solid foundation, right? So that's so cool that you're doing that. So what was the business that you're running when you were younger? What kind of business did you guys have?
So at that point, we actually owned a water distribution company. So it was available for sale. My dad monetized the opportunity, wanted to find ways to work with his kids. Yeah. And so in that case, we had water delivered from the location that filtered it all out of Phoenix, Arizona, went up in the northeastern Arizona, a little small town called Taylor, Arizona. Okay. And from there, we would pack it up on trucks and hand deliver it to home. So I was a glorified water boy growing up.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
And we got all the jokes after that movie came out.
Oh,
too.
I bet. Yeah. Great movie. So learning from those experiences, and then you fast forward to the point where now you're also running multiple businesses. You've got your you've kind of got your reach into a few different areas. Tell us a little bit about Watt Hub. What that is, how we can benefit from it. I know that I've known some people that have used that network. Tell us what that is. Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty straightforward business in that regard. It's focused in commercial, industrial, utility scale, and microgrids. A lot of unique profiles in that energy space to where people are trying to tackle energy charges and demand charges and the ever-changing time of use charges. And there's policies that you would never believe. I know residential guys, I think you guys got it pretty easy in some of that case where it's more plug and play and standardized, but everything is custom built and designed. Why we exist is because we have something called the Channel Partner Program, because we fill the gaps where that education lacks and that experience lacks, from finance all the way down to fulfillment and construction. And it's gotten a lot of people out of some trouble. We've seen some pretty interesting approaches where I'm like, yeah, you probably don't want to play in that space.
Yeah.
And we'll put our polish on it, make sure it's allocated properly, and everybody wins, including the customer, most importantly. So that's what we
That
do.
comes back to the integrity thing, right? Is like making sure that people are educated that come through your platform,
Yeah.
and that it's done correctly.
Yeah.
Which is huge. So, so with Storz Power, and that's your renewable storage business, right?
Yeah.
Is that primarily the purpose there? Is
Yeah, the key-
batteries and
Yeah, our main core competencies were battery manufacture, but we take a technology approach to it, to where we provide the fully connected home with energy management.
yeah,
Kind of follows our motto of build a smarter battery, not a bigger battery, with emphasis on sustainability. I think there's still wasteful processes in manufacturing, and so we want to take that into account, how we can do more with less.
Yeah.
And then ultimately affordability, just for the fact that I still believe energy should be a right, not a privilege. Unfortunately, we haven't crossed that axis yet. But we're doing our best efforts as possible to make sure that homes can protect their family and their assets, in case those emergencies, and of course have some independence, because I mean, this latest release in NEM 3.0, now there's an 81 cents a kilowatt hour rate from 4 to 9 p.m. I mean, that's insane.
yeah,
So imagine you and I, 20 years ago, walking into our first home and being able to afford a power bill. It'd be insane.
yeah. You look at the, I mean, you even just look at the inflationary rates of what $4 got you back in the 60s and 70s versus now, and that hasn't adjusted. And then you have, power consumption and bills, mortgage payments. It's like, it's just hard for anybody to really grasp or get ahead in this market.
Yeah.
And that's just one big aspect of it. So my question is, because again, you've had foresight in this industry. We've recognized that. I've worked with you, I think 3 years ago was probably the first time that we talked. And you've had foresight in this market as well with batteries. You mentioned the NEM 3.0. I think across the nation we're going to start seeing this as becoming more of a necessity instead of just a want, especially for salespeople.
Yeah.
So I know what our salespeople would ask is, the first thing is like the very, very basic thing, which is, how do I sell a battery, right? Like what do I talk about? What are the basics that I would say to a potential customer to help them understand the benefits? Like what would be like a basic pitch or a basic presentation that you talk about?
Yeah, a lot of times we just keep it super simple, and the fact is that solar alone does not operate when the grid fails. So simply is, we've got to protect our alignment on the grid. Power goes out, solar naturally backfeeds the grid during certain times of day. And so if someone's over there working on a line, he protects himself behind himself, but if you're sending power the opposite direction, we need to make sure they're protected. So what's unique about a battery is that it has a transfer switch built in. All products have this component, and it's able to ultimately isolate the grid, keep the policy and the people protected, and then create this microgrid at the home. So that way you can keep that asset you paid for on the roof 100% live. We've seen many a customer now says, I hadn't even considered solar until I can store my own power. I don't want to be reliant on the grid, and so that typically answers that.
Yeah.
The second thing is sometimes market specific. It's to where if you're in the California or Arizona or markets that have time of use charges, in that scenario, you have the ability now to charge that battery during the day and discharge it during those specific hours. It's like playing on the stock market where you always win. You know, buy low and sell high, and it works out just great. So those are typically the two main approaches in that case that keep it really simple. Some people take a safety approach to it. I got medical equipment to, hey, I want to tackle the utilities unfortunate billing structure.
Yeah. So is the technology what is releasing that, the energy at this specific time that you're talking about? So the technology is what does that?
That's right. Yeah, that's the software layer to it. I mean, a battery and a solar panel are dumb all by themselves, right? So you got to tell it what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and that's what we really specialize in. We can get very granular. And the ability to be very dynamic with the ever-changing energy profile, One day you have a house full of kids, the next day it's your empty nesters, right? Life changes, and so does your energy.
Yeah.
And to be able to stay dynamic of that is really key, and that's where our AI comes in play.
Sure. Okay. Congrats on that, by the way, because I think the software development part of it, like you said, it's like these products are so cool,
Yeah.
but they're not really smart until you until you add that aspect. And some companies do that too late in the game, and so so if I was sitting with a potential customer, one of the main concerns, objections that comes up is cost with anything, right? But specifically with this, because a lot of sales reps are used to selling at a, like a cost savings.
Yep.
And so now, again, using, West Coast as an example, and a lot of niche markets where, even here in Utah, a lot of times you're either saving at a break-even point where, they're spending the same much as they would with power, or they're spending a little bit more. What's your approach to that objection in cost, and why the battery is worth it, other than what you just said?
Yeah.
Is there a reason that you would overcome that? Or
it really becomes a value-added sell, and that's a big shift for a lot of folks. It's not always an apples-to-apples line item of savings, as you stated, right? So one of the key things is that everybody pays for an insurance policy one way or another, whether they like it or not. It's that maybe car accidents, that maybe house fire or flood. In this case, this is a 20-year prepaid insurance policy. In this regard, it has the benefits of keeping food in the fridge covered, also able to keep medical devices running, heat in the home. Those are all key things that literally are life or death.
Yeah.
And so it's a prepaid insurance policy, and conveniently enough, they're all able to be financed as well, just like as we see in the solar industry. A group out of the Midwest, Arkansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, those markets, their average customer pays $37 a month more than their utility bill, but they are killing it just for the fact of value add there. They're in a storm area. Everybody says, high cost of energy in California. Yes, they do happen, but yet there's fires. They turn the power off every time the wind blows more than 25 miles an hour. Here in Utah, this winter, I've had 16 power outages. So I'm in Lehigh Power, a little municipal power utility, and in that regard, they're not very long power outages. I think the longest one was 8 hours. But the fact is that I had power.
It's pretty long.
It was cold. So to keep your house warm. It's like, but I run off gas. Well, that little fan that blows that heat through those vents are still run off electricity. So a value added sale and really identifying what's really important to them, and having that independence. And also too is you are locking something in to where you don't have to worry about inflation or supply chain or the next catastrophic event that hopefully we don't ever see again. But we never know.
Never know. Well, and another, one thing people say too is like, I'll just get a generator, or I'll just, like kind of get something basic like that. How do we as salespeople, I mean, for me, I'm thinking if you really want to utilize your bigger investment, which is solar, that's why you would do this, right? It's a long-term investment in both cases. What would be another resolution for that when they're saying like, I'll just get a Generac or something?
Good question.
Smaller?
So typically what we're seeing is that like a whole home generator nowadays are almost equivalent in cost to a battery now. So we've actually kind of evened the playing field at that point, and that's just setup, installation, and where it's operational. But then with a generator, you also have to consider annual maintenance, and that is required. One thing, don't forget that annual maintenance. Swap out those filters, get the oil changed, make sure you're getting all debris out of the way. Generators can be very sensitive. But then also too is as soon as you need that generator is running all the time. So just burning fuel. One unfortunate event that happened here in Utah is, you remember we had that earthquake 3 years ago? And in that regard, there was the whole northern part of Utah that didn't even have gas. So all those generators, what do you do? So having the independence of having something on the roof and not anything that has that level of liability is super helpful too. But you don't have ongoing maintenance. So they're line for line. Generators are installing anywhere from $8,500 to $15,000 for a traditional system. You can do that same thing with a battery and get a 30% tax credit on it now.
Right. Okay. So that was my second question. So the battery itself is included in the tax credit, and then I'm assuming some states will also have incentives at some point.
There are different late state incentives, and if I can add something too is, now that batteries get their own standalone tax credit, They also can be retrofitted with certain manufacturers like Storz, where we can retrofit existing solar customers.
Got it.
So, and they get their own 30% tax credit again, and all the lenders out there have battery-only loans.
Okay. So you can add that to your arsenal at some point and just
Yep.
do battery-only sales, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Got a low time in your sales career?
Yeah.
Call back your old customers.
Sure. Yeah,
You
that's
know?
great. What do you feel? So a lot of sales reps with solar in general can be non-compliant in what they say, dishonest. They can be misleading, and then customers will come back, 2, 3, 4 years later, and it's just a really horrible experience. We were just at a summit where we talked about this, like how do we level up the industry as a whole to make sure that they're educated and knowledgeable?
Yeah.
Where would you say sales reps should go to find the most knowledge on this topic? Where can they educate themselves? Is there a place that you guys have?
Yeah, I would probably put the first level of responsibility on the manufacturers, honestly. I've seen a lot of information. I've actually attended recent webinars with some of our other competitors where I was pretty surprised on what was said. It just leaves too much of misinformation and too broad to really answer the questions where customers came away from that meeting thinking they could accomplish something they couldn't. And so as manufacturers, I would just challenge that the industry as a whole needs to level up and make sure we can get information down the end of the line. So our approach and how we've done it is that we've actually built sizing tools. And it's an app that every sales rep can use in the house. I mean, you can download an Android, Apple, it doesn't matter. So there's no question whatsoever. You and I are sitting down at the table, say, hey, what's important to you? Essentials all the way to whole home backup. And you literally just select your appliances inside the home, and it automatically kicks out a system, and that system configuration is matched to the goals of the client. And so it really comes off of load. We get pretty frustrated when we see the single install from some of these other competitors out there, and they're out there promoting whole home battery backup and got a whopping 3 kilowatts of output, thinking they can start an air conditioner. So we want to make sure that expectation's there. So we built tools all the way down to the sales level, so that way there is no question. And we've also been big components of education to some of the design and proposal tools as well. So we've helped them, we've consulted on their behalf to make sure that they have the sizing tools properly on their side. New rep, old rep, doesn't matter. It's a big industry. It's a brand new product. It's not just solar panels on the rooftop or simple conversion rate on that. Batteries do have some dynamics to it, and so we try to simplify it as much as possible.
Yeah, and you get, some of these young folks out there that are excited and energetic, and they just got hired to a new company, and and here's an option, right? Is this battery? And I don't think sometimes we realize how important that that education is in a closing aspect.
Yeah.
From what you're saying, where it's like, what is the actual output or load capacity of each individual appliance? That probably would even include lights, I assume, and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you want to operate in the home? And if it's on an emergency or essentials basis, as you said, that'd probably be like what, fridge, maybe a couple lights, things like that.
Fridge, freezer, lights, the internet, be
Yeah.
able to charge a cell phone so that way you can call out in case of emergency. Those are all key essentials for sure.
Yeah.
And there's many a product that can do that. It's just the fact is set that expectation.
Right.
That's the biggest misinformation out there. I mean, the way how we try to describe it is that I'm glad your Prius gets really good gas mileage, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people end up saying that they can take this gas tank, which is the size of a battery. So think of the capacity of a battery that's like equivalent to your gas tank on your vehicle. But then do you go bring a Prius to a truck pull or tractor pull? No, you don't.
Right.
You're not going to make it very far, 180 horsepower.
Yeah.
So you have to consider the engine and what that engine can do at any given time, the load it can pull. Load meaning is that air conditioner, the washer and dryer, the oven, the hot water heater, the well pumps, some of those things that people think are essential or important to their lives. And if you don't match those up, you're missing the boat.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately down in Texas, 397 people lost their lives with that freeze storm a few years back. And some of the other outcomes of that is that customers were grateful that their fridge and couple lights stayed on, but they had the expectation their whole house was backed up.
Right.
And the number one thing that people wish they had, guess what it was?
I mean, I would assume heat in that case, right?
It's actually hot water.
Oh, okay.
They
Yeah.
actually had no hot water.
Interesting. Yeah.
So they had the expectation that was going to work, and it didn't. And so Products can't achieve that. Yes, we have a competitive aspect where we can do more with less, which means a less, financial impact to the customer. But just don't miss the boat, because you're messing with people's lives at that point.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So education is huge. Obviously, understanding that, having the tools to sell it. And then I know you guys, like you said, you've done a really good job of getting out there and educating. You've got your own podcast. What is that called again, so we can follow?
Yeah, it's actually called Powered by Storz, and so we have a ton of different people that come on. You'll start seeing a lot more content coming out there.
Yeah.
Come see us at SolarCon. We're actually going to be at our booth, and we'll have a full podcast series on there. So reach out. We'd love to interview as many people as we can.
Awesome. Okay. And then what is, for you being an entrepreneur in this space, it's obviously super active right now. Where do you see the space going? And then Storz specifically, is it technology? Is it, cost availability like we talked about? Like, where is this industry headed?
Yeah, I think the industry in our vision of it all is really bringing a home experience to the table. Why that's important is that, people like the little widgets like door locks and doorbell cameras and things that they keep their lives running all the time. But we're taking the energy management approach to that, along with those convenience items, to where I'll give you an example of my own home. My home needed every bit of 15 kilowatts of active load. So if you take a Tesla Powerwall, that's 3 Tesla Powerwalls. I mean, that's a pretty big line item for cost. Not everybody's going to be able to afford that. So in my regard, I actually accounted for energy efficiency measures, accounting for air conditioning and lighting and occupancy and smart vents and those kind of things. And I dropped my load down to 9 kilowatts, just using basic smart home control through our AI platform that Storz Power has. And so in that position, I actually could cut my battery in half. So I needed less equipment to accomplish the same goal. And that's our goal, is to continually compress that.
Yeah.
As you and I have kind of had conversations before, finding ways that we can be less reliant on workforce. The workforce right now is heavily overburdened.
Yeah.
And we need to find ways to leverage other industry types to go and fulfill and be able to accomplish the customer's physical hardware goals inside the home, and really diversifying on that area. So you're going to see a lot of diversification within Storz, and it's all going to be access to all of our partners as well nationwide, to where it takes burden off of them and also contributes to retention, which is massively impact.
So essentially, like, are we talking about like dual purposing? Maybe somebody who's doing HVAC or a different product, and using the workforce to kind of combine those.
Yeah, and I mean, it's right around the corner, so we're really excited about that.
Awesome.
Right now, the industry is just on a rocket ship, right? Everybody's going renewables, but the fulfillment and logistics considerations of that are massively impacted.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, cancellations are going up. I just got a recent report last week, and cancellations are up in some markets as high as 24%. And it has nothing to do with the integrity of the business or its goals or fulfillment roles. It just comes down to customers are having to wait a really long time to get inventory, to get an installation date, to get a site audit. So we're also taking considerations nationwide touch points with a end customer within 72 hours of an install. So that way you're already fulfilling on that agreement. They're actually seeing activity for it, and it's going to contribute to lower cancellation rates as well.
Cool. So along with the education, along with making sure that we're doing things the right way, expanding the workforce, all these great things that you're personally involved with and that your partners are involved with, I think that you also have a unique ability to lead, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to build what you've built. And so what are some of the principles that you live by as a leader? How do you get people to follow you? How do you scale massive businesses and still have efficiency and integrity and good systems?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult in a lot of ways, right? That's the harder part of some of the roles and responsibilities of ownership. But at the end of the day, you've got to remember that there's still a human element that's part of this. Sometimes people just look at like, hey, I'm going to hand you this task and you're just going to do it one way or another. I've seen a lot of innovation around a lot of great people to where they're accomplishing things greater than I could ever imagine, and they need to be able to be empowered and feel responsible and accountable for that role and responsibility as well. And how you do that is we actually every year we do an internal kind of coaching approach with our employees, to where we talk about physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. Spiritually, not necessarily religion, but more or less the energy of things. And we try to focus on those key pieces on month over month. And we've seen the ability to get more involved with the individual, make sure that we're helping them go through that human resilience that's ultimately needed. One thing I'll say is that we're lucky in our space where we have a lot of W-2 employees, and ultimately there's consistency in income, where we're constantly looking for ways to coach even outside of that, to where our partners and their employees or their 1099 contractors can find ways to be more consistent in their business and be able to outlast the ebbs and flows. And so we get into aspects of what can you do to better prepare your life and your world overall. Is that new vehicle that you want that's fancy, that has that social media post, or you're looking for longevity and prosperity beyond your own life? And we like to get into those kind of conversations. One thing we're getting into is how you can invest into Roths and IULs and set up estates and trusts, so that way your assets are protected. Making sure that you're accounting for reserves and eventually being able to be your own bank. I mean, you don't have to have huge dollar amounts to consider these things in 15, 20, 30 years when you're ready to retire. And I mean, the previous demographic to us, you used to talk about, I've got retirement and I'm contributing to my 401ks. How many people in our industry technically have any of that right now, right? What are we setting this industry up for, and this group of people for in the future? Because that's what's going to carry our legacies out, right? What you're trying to accomplish as an individual, what we're trying to accomplish, our businesses are going to be handed off or sold off to somebody eventually. Yeah. And how do we make sure that legacy stays in place? And the only way you can do is make sure there's a really strong foundation underneath there where they can go up to the highs and lows. I mean, business goes great. Next time you turn around, you're in the dumps. And how do you support even the everyday lifestyle in that case? So. Yeah. I think that's our biggest approach. We have a lot of culture around that, which has a lot of mass adoption. Don't be afraid about the person. And there's a book that my wife's reading, and I get the Reader's Digest version of it. At the end of the night, and it's called Extreme Ownership. And I've learned a lot just from the way she kind of gives me the messages all the way through there, and taking accountability. There's a story there where there's two teams that are up against each other, and one team is failing. They're green, they're struggling all the way through, and they keep coming up in last place. And this other team goes through there like, well, these guys are stronger, and they've got more physical strength, and yada yada yada. Right? These other guys are weaker, and they're all constantly complaining. They did an exercise where they literally just switched the leadership, and sure enough, the losing team ended up being the winning team. And so it really comes down to them going through, giving them accountability, giving them good positive approach to what they can do, starting building it up in the right way, and the outcome was night and day. Yeah,
I think so. That's a big part of our thematic goal this year is extreme ownership. And I think anytime, like for us, we've brought together, some massive, already regionally dominant solar companies, and we've combined them together. And essentially, you've got like 4 different mafias, and you're like trying to. And so having extreme ownership over what we do individually and how that contributes to the team is huge. And then one thing that you said is empowerment and accountability. I think that's what a lot of people get wrong, is they either want to hold somebody accountable or they want to empower them. And so if you can find the balance of both, where you're empowering them to be their own person, but at the same time, it's like, hey, here's some things that you've agreed to. I need to hold you to that. And then essentially everybody wins, right? Like our Stratos is kind of our sales brand, right? Or our sales ecosystem. And our motto is conquer self, prevail together. And this whole idea of like, what does it mean to conquer self? It's exactly what you're saying. It's having extreme ownership over what you can accomplish, what you can control, what you can do over your person, spirituality, finance, all that stuff. And then, so I think it might have been Casey Baugh or somebody, the other day was mentioning the company that he was previously with. They paid out millions and millions and millions of dollars in commission. And a lot of those people who receive that commission are still living paycheck to paycheck.
I know.
And it's because they didn't do what you're doing, which is, hey, let's sit down and let's talk about how you can compound this. Let's talk about where this money can go. Myself included, in that early arena of door-to-door people, we didn't have that education.
No, we didn't.
Like, it was the cars, it was the, even, I mean, houses or personal house.
Yep.
It was the vacations. It was like, how do I spend this fast? And I'm in my 20s or early 30s.
Yeah.
It's not going to matter. I'll get it again. And then these people aren't getting ahead.
No.
And so it's cool to see that you guys are doing that now with that.
Yeah, one of the hardest things in people's lives is consistency, right? And so being able to rinse, repeat, and not burn out and go through the ever-changing challenges all the way through. And because there's strictly a human element, consistency is very difficult. So to go through there and say, oh yeah, I had all that money in my 20s, I'm going to continue this till I'm 60, that's not realistic. And another thing too about that accountability consideration is that it's a really great diagnostic tool for your leadership.
Yeah.
Because when that accountability is given to that team or individual, you know exactly where the ball dropped. So that way you can get in there and address it immediately and not have to wait for it to exacerbate and get worse over time.
Yeah.
So it's to your advantage all the way through as well.
Sure. I've found that, like, in this type of environment, some people will come to me and say, like, it's just a job, or you just need to be able to do kind of your work so that you can have your lifestyle. I personally chose this industry and chose this work because it is a lifestyle for me.
Yeah.
Because of those things that you're talking about. Like, I can learn personal development here. I can learn investment strategies. I can level up my my understanding and knowledge from people like you who've been there and done it, right? Where we can be in these environments to learn from great educators.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I chose this because I want this as a lifestyle, not just as a job. And it sounds like you're providing that opportunity for your people. So that's cool.
Yeah, we try to as much as possible. And in the end, I mean, it's like I said, we're in the human business first, and we sell a service beyond that. But if you don't have everybody on board with what you're trying to do, I mean, you're not going to go anywhere for it.
Yeah.
So win
great.
friends in a lot of places, and you can go out and accomplish the world.
Yeah. So to wrap up, this has been amazing, really, really good stuff that we're getting from you. If you were to go out and teach a group of salespeople and you wanted to leave them, with one bit of advice or one tip, whether that's on sales, selling batteries, leadership, life, what's something that you embody that you would want to tell them?
I know. I think one key thing is it's not what you make, it's what you keep, and sometimes you have to look at that internally as well. Is to what you actually keep a part of you along the way that was your original character that got you in the business, that had that drive, that won you those friends and won you those relationships and continually on to grow in your personal life. Make sure you keep intact along the way. If you get challenged, go and find people that know you for you in your highs and lows. A lot of people don't start self-diagnostics or they don't start self-diagnosing themselves until it's too late. Don't be afraid to say, hey, things are good. What can I do to be better? And really look around for that environment and the people around you to make sure that they can keep you accountable as well. And so I think that's something that's really important, that as all the different influences come through of what's cool on social media and the latest and greatest thing, and trying to keep up with the Joneses, that doesn't matter. You still got to go home at the end of the day, put your head on your own pillow, and you got to live with yourself. And so what does that look like? And so what can you do to continually invest in yourself to improve that? I love to be that person, and I have a lot of those people that I look up to in my life that are for me. And I hope to continually maintain that till the day I'm gone. So, and be able to ingrain that to my family along the way. So keep yourself intact, realize what you stand for, and don't defer from it.
Yeah, thank you. So be a person of integrity, and we bring it back to where we started. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Yeah,
we know you're busy, and hopefully
appreciate having the opportunity.
We'll catch you at SolarCon.
Yeah, take care.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
I just wanna see me on top.